So today I wanted to take some time to talk about some of the things that me and Dr. John Lilly talked about many, many years ago when he invited me over to his home, his Malibu home, to discuss some of the things that I had found were key principles of how you and me operate as, let's just say, a temple of man, how it related to the temple, what I would call the temple of the universe, and what I call the omega point, he called the center of the cyclone. And we're going to go over some of that today, how you operate as a human. It might be able to help you to better understand about brainwaves, how they affect you, how they affect your subconscious, how you can have the e-ticket ride, which I'll give towards the end of this video, how you could release some of these, what we call inner demons or things that have been bothering you without having to go off and get on drugs. Not something that I recommend at all. I believe that everything you need is within inside you, and that's what we're going to be going over today. One of the things I also wanted to point out too is that, ironically, that when I was at John Lilly's home and we were talking about some of these things I can't even share with you. I'm not sure it would be believed. But I spent 3 or 4 hours at his home, and he wanted me to meet his billionaire funder at the Chateau Marmont. I talked about in the previous video what a crazy, crazy day that was, crazy night. And it would fall under one of those crazy nights. I know there's a person, a lawyer, that has one of those sites. It would be something like that. But ironically, is when we were talking about all of the brain waves and how things interact within the human consciousness, it was honestly the Bible, Old Testament, actually, that Dr. John Lilly was most interested in. And it was that subject that he wanted me to download for this billionaire funder, this oil man, whose name I still don't know to this day, who had rented out the 2 bungalows at the Chateau Marmont, specifically how the 10 Commandments are related to music, the waveform of music, if there was possibility, the physics of that, and also how the 10 Sephiroth. So it was a very unique and interesting night, to say the least. I'm not going to go over that now, but just to relate to you that it was the biblical understanding of the Old Testament that he seemed honestly more jazzed about talking about that and the experience that I had when I share with you about the omega point. So this will be kind of a multi-tiered. It might be a multi-part. So what I downloaded to Dr. John Lilly, I mentioned also in a previous video that he had heard tapes of me through his assistant, about 7-8 hours worth, and that's what prompted him to invite me over to his home. And some of the things we'll be talking about is if you were to look at the universe as being round, and let's just go back here. This would be before time and space, right? This is God, and I would say God all and all. And that's very important, as we'll learn later, what his motivation is. This is going to be a two-tiered, again, one, some biblical principles, and some psychological human principles over here. But they all interrelate. There's the old adage, as above, so below, or as within, so without. This is kind of the same principle here. So we can have God all and all. So if you imagine before this line here, there is nothing but light. There is nothing but the presence of God. He is all by himself. Then he decides to create. And what he creates, we have in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And we have all 3 forms that create reality. We have in the beginning, which is time, right? And he created, which is energy. And we can use energy as matter, right? Because that's what energy is. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times speed of light squared. We'll be talking about that in some later videos too, because you can actually weigh the universe and put some numbers to it. And the numbers that will be presented to you will blow your mind. I mean, how powerful is God? We can do those numbers and get, a roundabout idea that's so mind-boggling you can't even fit it in your brain. And then you realize that dark matter is more dark matter than regular matter. And suddenly it gets exponentially crazy. And that's just the known world. We're not even talking about the spiritual world, but I digress. So we have time, energy, and matter. And then, of course, we have space itself, right? And so this is what is giving us our reality. And so if we draw back to this right here, I learned early on that, let's say you're born here, right? And you're going to die here. So this is time. We're going to just put time here. And I learned early on this XY axis that this is energy. If you were to take the troughs of a waveform, right? This amplitude will determine what your energy is for this waveform. And of course, it's over a period of time. So let's just say that this is the beginning when you're born, this say the end when you die. And if you really want to think about time, what is time? Time is the measurement of death. For at one point, there will be time no more, and there'll be death no more. So time is literally the measurement of this reality. So we can't have reality until we have these three things: time, energy, and space, something for the matter and energy to be engulfed in. Just like our body has time and energy. We have time with our breath. That's our lifetime. And if you want to understand what the breath is, the ruach of God, imagine yourself like a scuba diver and you have this tank on you. That breath is not yours. Everyone that ever dies, let's start. Everyone that ever is born, the first thing they do is breathe. They smack the baby. What do they have to do to get that baby to breathe? You breathe. That is the life, okay, of your flesh. In the end, everyone who dies, I don't care if it's a gunshot, I don't care if it's fire, I don't care if it's a heart attack, I don't care if it's a disease, a car wreck, whatever it is, every person that has ever died because they stopped breathing. So this measurement here, beginning to end, this life that we have, we can see in this diagram. So this is going to be a conceptual framework of kind of like the universe, but also as a human being. And we're going to talk about some of the things that happen to us over time that don't allow us to fulfill our dreams. So, and we're going to talk about the they who control the narrative around this. So when you look at our reality, everything seems to be in threes. If you want to have a family, you have to have a mother, father, and child, right? If you were to break down time, you have past, present, future. If you want to break down matter, you have liquid, solid, gas. If you want to break out space, you have length, breadth, width. So you can go on and on and on and on ad nauseum. There's some great books. Nathan Woods, I believe, is Trinity of the Universe is good. Charles Pierce, who is a real amazing human being, actually tried to deny the idea of the Trinity, and he wrote in his writings the firstness, secondness, and thirdness, and he proved that it absolutely was true, that everything seems to be revolved around trinities. And of course, you have the good, the beautiful, the true, the I, we, and it. I mean, literally, you can go on. We'll do another presentation on that. But so we have time, energy, and space. We have our time, we have our energy, and we have our space. So you can call this your environment of who you are. Now, deep within you, you have what I determined was I call the omega point, not Teilhard de Chardin's omega point. This is of man into the end, when they all integrated this trans, humanism kind of thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something. This is how I identify. That's what I called it. John Lilly, when we talked about that, he called it the center of the cyclone. He called it a few other things, and of course, he understood this through his meditations and his use of the water tanks, the isolation tanks. The idea is that if you're not familiar with Dr. John Lilly, he was MIT and he wanted to learn brainwaves and how brainwaves affected the human person, human mind, and that could you learn those brainwaves of anger and lust and greed and all these things and put a number to quantify these wavelengths. And then once you know that, you could with a knob, you could affect the person effectively, affect the person. And so he ended up doing this, and he would tap electrodes into a monkey's brain, and then they'd swell, and he'd get all these false readings, and he got really smart, and he made these small like cylinders, and he would tap them in and let them heal, and then he could put the probes anywhere he wanted to, and he could measure all this. And imagine he started to measure all of these frequencies of the human emotion and the human being. And of course, there was a couple agencies that would love to have that information. And he went in to create what was called the Lilly wave. You won't hear people talking about that, but basically this idea was, well, now that I have all these quantifiable measurements of brain waves, how is it that I can affect you? And he found there was a biological filter that you couldn't use an outside carrier frequency to affect the human person. But then he found a way to block that, and he called that the Lilly wave. And it's apparently being broadcast in every city, according to Brannigan, a friend of his who saw it on an oscilloscope. That's another story. Let's get back to these brain waves that me and him were talking about. So the human mind, there's several brain waves that you're all familiar with. We'll write them up here. There's gamma, right? And then you have beta, and then you have alpha, and then you have theta, and you have delta. Now I don't have all these memorized, but I think it's something like this, or 6 or 7, say 7 to 11, and then beta is like 11 to 15 or 17, and then gamma's above that. I could be off 1 or 2 on there. But what this is sharing with you is that the gamma is a high amplitude, right? And a delta is very low amplitude. So what I had learned early on, very early on, I talk about how that in wrestling, Tom Cruise, and I was friends with Charlie and the Sheens and all that, and I had a scholarship that I was working on for Oklahoma. My whole life changed when me and him wrestled, and I went in a different direction, and I just had to find the meaning of life, to be quite honest. And I went through all the Eastern religions, and I fell across a guy named Gurdjieff, who I thought was pretty amazing. He comes with a black box warning. I don't really want to share some of the spiritual practices that I learned from him, that I had a spiritual experience that almost identical to what John Lilly had experienced. One day I'll share that. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to do what he was doing by funneling certain disciplines. Funneling is a great way in business or anything in life. It's kind of like the Bruce Lee's motto is reject that which is bad, absorb that which is good, and create something unique within yourself. If one thing isn't working, use the best practices of others and funnel them in to create something unique. By using Gurdjieff, one of his spiritual practices, I developed 2 more to add to it, and it actually worked. And I had an out-of-body experience very similar to what Eleven had in Stranger Things. I connected with John Lilly on this because he was using the isolation tank, and he didn't call them that. He called them gateways. His idea was to lessen the brain waves and get into these states. Most people don't like Picasso. Let's just to talk about these brain waves here. So gamma would be someone like is an epileptic or very, very high. If you ever watch the movie Powder, maybe I'll play a scene here, and that is gamma wave. And when you see that he's being rejected by his father in the scene, you'll see his brain waves on a cellulogram. It's going off the chart. That would be gamma. I'll play that one here.
We'll do everything we can for him, Greg. You know that.
What are you doing to him?
Measuring his brainwaves. You don't have to do this now.
That's not my son. That's not my son.
The next one would be beta, and beta is is kind of where we're at all the time, and it can be an irritated mood, an upset mood, or just a working mood. You've got a brainwave that is. I mean, if we were to put these up, this would be here and then here, and then they get softer as they go, and it becomes a smaller wave towards the end. Alpha is what you would describe. They're using it a lot with children with ADD. If you ever find yourself watching a TV show and someone comes in, it's like, what are you watching? You look like you're glazed over, like you're hypnotized. That would be, you're an alpha. What are you watching, Fred? I don't even know. Some animal show on Discovery, whatever, but you're so zoned in, you're calming down, your brain waves go down. The next one would be theta, and theta is your dream state. And as I was mentioning, Picasso and a lot of creative people, once they get to that creative state, like writers will keep a journal next to their bed, because when they get to these dream states, it gets very creative and allows you in this headspace to come up with ideas. Picasso probably was alternatively using drugs as well, but he would have a bowl, like a steel bowl with a spoon. He'd fall asleep, and the spoon would fall into the bowl and wake him up, and he'd have these ideas, right? And of course, and this theta, you only get with dream state. You're not even. This is the dream state. It's difficult, very difficult to get into. In fact, a Buddhist monk, would spend his whole life meditating, trying to get to them. They'd have glimpses of this. And delta is something you've really never experienced consciously. This would be, I almost like to liken this to Jungian's collective unconscious. It's when you're in deep sleep. There's absolutely no dreaming going on. To me, this is like a computer defrag state. Every time that you are taking information, you take in billions of bits of information every day, and you don't need all of it. I've always felt that these two were an attempt to the mind to just dispense of all the riffraff that you don't really need. But there's some amazing things that happen here in Delta that I want to talk about. Really, truly amazing, life-changing things that I want to go over in this video. Now, the theta and delta are almost impossible to get into here outside, because with your awareness, theta can be done, but there are ways that you can get there in 15 minutes. That's called binaural beat technology. And a lot of people are afraid of that and not understanding it. But there's a couple of paths that people would go to get this. And one was to have out-of-body experiences. I'll put the guy's name up. I've read some of his books. It's not coming to mind right now. But he's very famous, and he used the binaural beat technology to put you in these brainwave states, and he would use it for out-of-body experiences. I had the out-of-body experience, and I can tell you several times, and it's not a place I really want to go. I don't think that we're meant to go there. It's like crossing a veil, if you will. And my experience was not so bueno, so I really didn't want to go back. But I know how to get there pretty quick through these funneling of these spiritual practices. But with binaural beat technology, you can get there within 15, 20 minutes. But most people use this for purposes that I wouldn't recommend. But if you have things that you're dealing with in your life, and just like your mind subconsciously is trying to defrag, there are things psychologically that have happened to you, whether you did them and you're ashamed. I know Charlie, every time I see him on interviews, because I'm sure he has a lot to shake his head out of, is what he calls shame shivers. And that, I'm sure you've experienced this, where a thought will come into your head and you don't even want to see it. You just shake. We have a lot of these things, and I like to liken them to like beach balls. Those big airy beach balls that you're keeping them underwater, which is taking a tremendous amount of psychological pressure, whether unknowingly or knowingly. Maybe things happen to you, whatever the case may be. You're holding these down. So I learned about brainwaves because when my parents, were in California, and I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. They wanted me to go to transcendental meditation. I didn't want to go, but I said, my father gave me a brochure and he showed me where like they were levitating and learning to fly. And what kid wouldn't want to learn how to fly? So I said, sure, I'll go. And it's probably some photography trick or whatever. Or they were hopping up through some sort of yoga thing and taking the snapshot, 1,000 frames per second or whatever, and getting it. But I went and I learned basically it's about brain waves and how to slow your mind down at a very early age, and through going through these other disciplines and other religions before I became a Christian, I was going down that road, and I realized that white magic, black magic, they're both the same. One just gets you there faster if you're willing to do a few more things. I could share some firsthand experiences of true warlocks. I've met them. I know firsthand, through firsthand testimony of someone I knew that. There's some real things that go on there, and so what made me become a Christian is I realized the devil was true. So it's very, very real. Maybe I'll talk about some of those experiences. I'm not sure YouTube will allow me to say some of the things that go on there, but very dark, very evil, but a lot of power. People, when they do these things, can turn into like a Darth Vader through their mind, put people up against the wall. These things happen. But they're doing things that, again, I don't think that I could share. But I say all that to say that I was going through all this Eastern and went to white, and then just realized it was black, and realized the devil was real. And part of my testimony is like, well, what side do I want to be on? It's not that dude, because he was a created being, and I absolutely believe that he's real. So back to the waves. So I was very understanding of these waves, and it made me realize I had this concept and this theory that I believe has been proven, at least for me, and that's kind of what I want to share here today, is that, when you look at this XY axis of time and space and us, and whether it's the universe or whatever, and I'll show some pictures of how this relates to the universe. I'll pop them up on the screen. Is that when we, as a human, are going through our time, and we have this energy that we're dealing with here. So, looking at these brain waves and putting this together, I came across what I like, again, that has proved to me to be true. And in reading and listening to Joseph Campbell, he really helped me connect the dots in that the shamans throughout the world, in all cultures, were chosen by two groups of people, the shamans, the medicine men, and that they were either A, they were sick unto death, right? Or B, they were epileptics. And it hit me because I already had this thought. The movie Flatliners, that the closer you could get to death, well, maybe closer you could get to the veil the other side. That was the spiritual practices I was doing. It was basically a death repose with a couple added features that allowed me to get my consciousness as flatlined as possible. And there's been a couple movies about that, right?
Flatline.
They're getting smaller. He's dying.
Brain death. Now it's real.
Begin CPR. 1,000. 2,000.
Sodium bicarbonate.
3,000. Back him. 4,000. 5,000. Freeze.
Oh my God.
2,000. 3,000. 3,000. Now 350. Clear.
Nothing. Holy shit. Nothing.
Got him.
I mean, what happens when you hit that? And then, of course, on the other side is the epileptic, whose energy waves, if you were to take these, it's super high, and so they must also be hitting this line, right? I was striving for this line, but then it hit me that you could get it from this line. And what is it that they're seeing? Well, you have DMT experiences, you have John Lilly's experiences, and the experiences that I had. Stranger Things, talks about that little some far out stuff. That's based on what was that experiment? There, Montauk or something out in New York, but they took some liberty there. But I mean, about her going into like an isolation tank, like John Lilly, and putting the probes. So it's all very much this idea of getting those brainwaves down low, or in the aspect of powder up high, and he's able to move things. So things happen here. So what I had realized is that deep inside everybody, I likened it to a crystal, a deep crystal that is pure. Kind of like Meister Eckhart, not Eckhart Tolle, but Meister Eckhart, like from the late 1800s, that said, the eye that looks upon God is the same eye that looks upon me. And what in Zen Buddhism, the glass, it's a dirty glass. You got to shine the glass. So the idea is that everyone has within them, when they're born, this perfect eye that looks upon God. I mean, a child will look at the moon and say, "Look, it's a big rock in the sky." Well, they're not wrong. They see things as they really are. Marcus Aurelius, the first rule in life is to have an untroubled spirit, and the second spirit, right? And the second is to see things as they really are. And so what happens to us is either through education, parenting, our culture, religion, all these things, right? Well, that lens that we have gets blurred, it gets muddy, or maybe there's some trauma that takes place and it gets cracked or even shattered. At that point, there's some psychiatrists that are needed, some very PhDs that are needed to put Humpty Dumpty back together, as it were. But for the average person, these cracks or this mud are things that have happened to us or things that we've just been taught wrong, and we need to awaken, right, and cleanse that lens right there. But we're being clouded by what I referred to earlier as these events that happen that cause these shame shivers, as Charlie talks about, that are like beach balls. Right. And we hold these down like the bones in our closet that we don't want anyone to see. So how do you deal with that? I mean, the first thing that any psychiatrist or psychologist does is they put you on the couch and it's like they ask, tell me about your time as a child, or tell me about this. They're trying to pull these beach balls out of you to get you, to expand on what's really bothering you. But what if I were to share with you, there is a way to do this on your own, and I can give you the e-ticket ride to do it with binaural beat technology. So if you can get your wavelengths down here low enough, and with binaural beat technology we can do that. What happens if I can get you in delta and you can actually be aware of what's going on inside you? Right? And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about in introspection, interiority, to going in and trying to find our true self. If you say, I can't stand myself, then the I, which looks upon God through here, can't stand myself, the accumulation of all the experiences that I define myself by. And that's the problem that people get into. That's why I liked about Gurdjieff. He said everyone's an automaton. Basically, they're not real. Why I love Musashi, changed my life forever, is because he said he searched the high and low for his whole life to find an authentic human being, and he never met one. How often do you meet people every day, your family members, coworkers, whoever, who have a mask on them? Lots of that. Nietzsche talked about this, right? Everyone's got this false persona. I am this for my business, and I put this mask on. I am this for my family, and I put this mask on. I mean, no one's themselves. I mean, it's exhausting. I find people, I don't know about you, but I find people exhausting because it's like, I know I'm not talking to the real person, and it just gets old. So you just want to move out, get some acreage somewhere and just get away. I get it. But what if there's a way that we could find ourselves again? And that was my goal, right? I wanted to find who I was. As I saw my friends go supernova and become all these things, and I was going through some issues like, how did this happen? What is life all about? That was the motivation to get on this tour, this journey, as it were. So when I had the experience of knowing that this XY axis could be maintained by either going high energy or low energy, then I realized that I was onto something, and that's when I had the experience. But if you were to use binaural beat technology to get into Delta, the first thing that would happen to you is you would fall asleep because that's all you've ever known, right? I mean, when you go in Delta, you're asleep. So the moment you're put in there, you're asleep. And maybe I should explain this a little bit more clearly. I know there's a gentleman. One of the motivations of doing this video is there's a guy out there right now. He goes, he's KD, I think he goes by that, or KT, first and last name. And he's talking about it. If you can get the theta, this is the secret of this brotherhood that creates wealth. And he's not wrong. He's got a lot of things. It's all about, making money, I guess. I want to create a better me. So you really got to get down to Delta. And I haven't heard him talk about that yet. KT, I think is his name, named after a certain prime minister in Canada. So, but if you were to get into Delta with this, how would that work? So I want to share with you how binaural beat works. So you have two hemispheres of the brain, right? And most people have very low thresholds for pain or anger. You know these people, right? They get angry real fast. They have low thresholds, low tolerances. But they found that CEOs and people like Michael Jordan, top athletes, have a very even right and left hemisphere that are balanced, right? You can actually put this on a chart and in Celligraph or whatever, and you can see it. And you can see some of it just, really tilted, right? That's the mass of people are very tilted one way or the other, left brain or right brain. But what you really want is to even this out. And well, how do you do that? Well, one of the ways is by using this binaural beat technology, because you have this inside your brain, you have what's called the olivary nucleus. You can look that up. Each side has one. And what happens is the way a binaural beat works is you put in, let's say, 90 hertz in one ear, and then you put in, let's say, 92 in the other. And if you know anything about universal laws, you know about homeostasis. Homeostasis is the best way to describe it. Everything wants to find balance. You want to find balance. I want to find balance. If I were to take a glass of water and shake it, right, what happens? It's universally, it'll find balance. Everything wants to find balance. So the same thing happens here. I think they found this in the 70s or 80s. I can't remember what university, but if you were to take 90 in one ear and 92 in the other, well, it's not balanced. So what does the mind do? It creates a second wavelength. So you have, let's say, this going through your mind, right, through the 90, but then it has the 2. Well, the 2 is delta, so it creates a second beat, right, in your brain, and it creates this delta wave. And it takes about 15 minutes for this to happen. And again, when this happens to you, this time frame, well, you'll just literally fall asleep. But if you train yourself with this I used to do this binaural beat technology every day for a minimum of 5 years. I think I did it longer. And there was actually days I would do it 3 or 4 times a day because it's very soothing. It's a meditation on steroids. But I wasn't looking for out of body experiences, and I wasn't looking for wealth. I was looking to find a better me. And what you find is that at some point you will be awake in Delta, and there's some very interesting things that happen. Let me show you the first thing that happens is that the way that the two minds communicate is through the olivary nucleus, right? Now, people talk about as you get older, you can't you change your mind. That's actually not true. If you know anything about how the mind works, Psycho-Cybernetics is a great book, a game changer there. But what happens is the olivary nucleus is now communicating with the other olivary, and it's saying, "Hey, man, I'm setting up these synapses. I'm building a bridge. Every time I get this difference, I'm building this bridge, right?" So, like the memory of a synapse. If you were a child, you put your hand on a flame. you're going to get a huge synapse that says, don't ever do that. Trunk that says, don't ever do that again. I mean, you are wired from a very early age not to touch flame. Let's say you smoke cigarettes. You smoke one every single day, you 10, 12 a day, 20 a day, whatever. Every time you're doing that, you're getting this great dopamine hit or whatever, and nicotine, and it's affecting you, and you're sending out little synapses. Well, this habit creates a trunk, right? And it's like it's in your brain. It says, you know what? I'm not doing anything other than smoking, or I have this other trunk that says, don't ever touch flame. So habits to be broken need to be, they'll slowly turn to a trunk, to a spaghetti, it'll always be there. You'll always fight it, but it gets less and less and less. Well, when you are doing binaural beat technology and you're awake during Delta, or even if you're not awake, the beautiful thing about this is you can still put this on at night and sleep, and it'll still train your mind. One day you'll be awake, and what's happening is you're building this bridge between the two hemispheres. And suddenly you find your threshold goes up for pain, and not necessarily pain, but I mean things that irritate you, right? I mean, an example, you could be at the soccer game watching your children, and one of the kids throws a bucket of water on you, because the team won. And you may go, what the, and be all mad at the kid for doing that. That's a choice that you made. Or maybe on a hot day and you really enjoyed it. It may have took you by surprise, but you enjoyed it, right? That's your reaction. But a lot of people's reaction, you choose to be like mad, even though it was a kid, which, if over time you did this, you'll find that your reaction times to intolerance goes way up. Your threshold goes way up, and because you have access to both sides of your brain, you literally become smarter in a sense. They become, there's the IQ and there's the EQ, the emotional control. Those that are successful aren't necessarily the highest IQ, but they are the highest EQ, the emotion quotient. And so that's when I learned that emotions are incredibly important. And the part of the secret I was talking with John Lilly about is that we're driven by emotions. If you want to know what drives you, it's emotions. And let me tell you, big media and all companies and corporations know that. Every time you see a pharmaceutical commercial, it's bright colors and everyone's smiling and beautiful music, or it could be a car ad. It has nothing to do with the car, but it has to do with a feeling or emotion. Anything that emotes this wonderful aura that you want to be about. So, the other thing I learned from doing this Delta thing here is that something very interesting happens. And I'll share the e-ticket ride, how to do this even, and it has to do with John Lilly's tanks a little bit. Joe Rogan, if you're watching, I'll share this maybe personally with you, but once after a while you train, this could take, weeks. I did it for 5 years. It takes a lot to get me angry. Not saying that I don't, but I found myself way more balanced because both of my hemispheres have been trained to be, bridged. So, but what's even more important than all of this, and this is pretty important, and more important, I think, than gaining wealth or, whatever, is that when you are in these states of Delta, let's just call it a Jungian sea of conscious, the uncollective unconscious. You are now looking at your experiences objectively, no longer subjectively, which is all a psychologist is trying to do. They're trying to draw out these traumas, things that have happened to you, and get you to see it as a third-party objective observer and realize that it doesn't define you. It doesn't measure you. It's not who you are because of what happened to you. It just is a part of your experiences, and you can move on. But you need to see it objectively. As long as you maintain that as being you, then you, as the subject, say, I define myself by what happened. And that's where 99% of all people are. And they're in this autonomous loop. And they're literally just being driven by their past and their emotions because they're trying to think things through. We'll get to that in a minute. But the beautiful thing about this is that when you're in Delta, these beach balls, the biggest beach ball of your emotion that you've been hiding down in that freezer of your conscience, either unconsciously or consciously, will come up. And rather than having a shame shiver and throw it right back down because you can't deal with it, what will happen is it will play out like the movie that it is. And once you see it objectively because you're in delta. You're no longer seeing it as you. You're seeing it from this eye. The true eye that looks upon me is the same eye that God looks upon me. And once you see that, you can realize that the collective unconscious, it's like it gives you the answer to the problem that you've resisted looking at, whether you want to call it a personal demon or whether you want to call it, just the trauma that's hindered you. It comes up, you view it on a screen. See if I can make this even better. Do you know the Viewmaster? I'll put up, the old Viewmaster toy, the old red toy, and then you'd have this wheel of all these images that were on it, and you had to put it up to a light source, right? And then you would look at it and you would see these beautiful images of national parks or animals or whatever, right? But you had to look through the light source to get to the images. That's what you are. You are literally the Viewmaster, your eye, which can't stand yourself, which is this reel of images of your past that you define yourself by. And all you see is the color of your world through what's happened to you. So what has to happen is that these images we need to kick to the curb, right? And these are the ones that we actually, see. How about the ones you don't see? And these are the beach balls that will come up. They'll come up in succession. The biggest, the one that bothers you the most will come up first. You objectively see it. You kick it to the curb. Another idea that I can give you that represents that is and there's an episode in Friends where all three of the girls lose a boyfriend and they're just so upset about it. They all get together and they decide to write all this stuff down. Can't remember what it was about their boyfriends or their feelings or whatever. And they put it in a ashtray or something. And they light it on fire. And to objectively just let it go away, to burn it away. And then what happens? It catches on fire and they let it go and the firemen come and there's three good looking firemen. And so it's like the universe answers, if you're willing to kick this out and give it out, the universe will give you something in return. So that's kind of the idea, is that once you start understanding this, and we'll go over more detail in another video, once you start understanding this, you can work within yourself. Because I know a lot of people don't really want to go to another human being and spill out all the bones in their closet. It's a very hard thing to do. A lot of people have, and you see it in movies. They finally break down in tears, and because it wells up. What Charlie calls the shame shiver. But to illustrate this to a further point, the reason a lot of people can't get out of this is because they are looking at their mind to fix the problem. And I know that we're talking about the mind here, but the mind, once it settles down, can get you to this, what I call the omega point, or what John would call the center of the cyclone, where all these answers are. In an illustration from a movie, I think it was Neo and the Revolutions or something, when the bots or whatever they were called were coming into the Zion, and they were all freaking out, and all of the captains were there. They had a map, and they were thinking through all the things they could do to counter all these alien bots or these machine bots coming in. And what did Neo do? He says, I have to be alone. He went off and he got himself calmed down, and he got to this collective unconscious, or this space where he could actually see through things and not his mind. And so an even better illustration is imagine like the Wells Fargo had the horses out front, and you got the carriage, right? And so the horses would be your emotions. Right. And your mind is the driver that has all of these reins. Right. And as you go through life and you go through, everyday life, you hold on to these reins of your emotions. When you're alone, or maybe you're at a party or whatever, you're feeling good, you let the horses run, right? You let them ride. But if you're at work or at family, whatever, you hold on to them. But everyone has these moments. But you think that your mind is in control of all these emotions, right? But have you ever thought about that you have a passenger inside, right? Inside your carriage, and that would be your spirit. That would be this I that you could relate to right here, right? And do you know? Have you ever got off the high horse, as it were, and let go of your emotions, and said, you know what, the mind, right, just needs to settle down and to get down, get grounded, open up the inside, get inside the interior of yourself, and ask that's the I where they want to go. I mean, you are driving, right? You know you're driving somewhere. Do you know where your true self wants to go? And here's the kicker: do you know what language it speaks? It's a phenomenal spirit that it interacts with you in a very, very restful place, and this will help you get there. But the corporations and propagandists and people that go back way, way, way back, I mean, back in biblical times, know that the number one thing that they control, if they can control the narrative, and what they control is emotions. So imagine, and I'll see if I can't post this on a board. These are all your emotions. And you have gates. You have gates to who you are, right? We're talking about inside you. We're talking about psychologically, emotionally. So you can talk about how that you have feelings of anger and lust and greed, and I mean, I'll show a dial, and you'll see that all of these emotions, right, are like a wheel. They're attached. And they can drive this. They can drive your emotions and really detach yourself from who you really are. And they've learned this. They have this down to an absolute science. I mean, they're using social media to drive this through Twitter, or X, and whatever. I'm not on any social media, so but I can see what they're driving. They're moving this wheel. And I'll go more about this wheel in another video, but it gets even deeper than that. But and this goes back to ancient times. But the narrative, if you can control the narrative, you can control these wheels of emotions. And you know, a lot of people liken these to chakras. You know, you have your 7 chakras, 9 chakras, depending what the division of yoga or whatever you look at. There's more than 7 or whatever. But they are real. They're to me, they're emotional centers. And the reason you know they're real is I believe it releases like hormones, right? Or I should say, some sort of emotion. Let's say as a mother, you absolutely are terrified of water, have been since a child. And you feel that fear down here in your gut. You feel that fear, just that sinkiness in your stomach. I'm not going to do that. But you have a child, and that child falls in the water. Are you not? You feel the love for your child, and that love comes from this higher center, and that higher center overrides your fear, and you will get in that water if you had to swim, and you'll get your child out. And these emotional centers, right, are literally they're pulsed. They can be pulsed. That's what music is really all about. I'd love to talk about that more. That's what me and Lilly were talking about a little bit. I'll share a little bit what we talked about there and the billionaire. But so back in the 60s or 70s, they didn't call themselves musicians. They called themselves tonal artists because they could hit you with sound waves, right, and affect your being. Kind of things that Lilly was kind of working on. I mean, he was working on the vibrations of what those tones are. They were taking tones and affecting you. So there are certain instruments that affect you. For instance, if you were in a wartime stance and you wanted to build the pride of your army, you would use brass, right? It would hit your chest, and you bow out, be all proud. We're going to march and we're going to dominate you. Well, it's the same thing that happens in football. When you have a brass band, because you're competing on the gridiron against the other people, so you're bringing out this breastplate of pride for your team or for your country. Violin, right? Hits you in the upper chakras. It hits you in the upper emotions, right? Drums, I don't think there's any, we know where that hits you down there. Very primal, very sexual, very that whole thing, right? Of course, that's what rock and roll is. And that's what jazz means. That's what rock and roll means. It goes back to these emotions, right? And so it's these tonal artists and these propagandists and these corporations. They have a science that goes back way back. Another video, but they understand this. They understand who you are, and they keep you turning and spinning and spinning and spinning. They even call themselves with the spin room, and when you politics and so all this is happening to you all the time. You're being spun. And I guess what I'm saying is that we need to slow down. You need to get to close to flat line as possible, not death, but but if you wanted to get closer to that, that's what would be delta. You're going to start to experience a lot of wonderful spiritual things. And every culture knows this intuitively. Everyone uses something, every culture, to slow things down. I've even heard the Indians had an eagle bone they would hit in their ear, and it would do something similar to this. Of course, there is drugs, right? That lower your, people that use cannabis, right? It slows everything down. Alcohol can slow things down. Hot baths, like in Asian countries, a lot of hot baths. Hot baths can slow things down. I recommend the slow route, not the gamma. I know that Joseph Campbell talked about the shamans being one of the two. What he talked about is that it was an interiority thing. They would be close to death, and they'd go deep inside themselves, and they'd go off into like a metaphor of a forest, and they'd meet all these things and demons or whatever, and slay, and they'd come back to the tribe, and they'd relate all these things when they awakened out of their and so that was something that was happening, back then. So that's what these tribes would do. They would have this shaman come back. Well, he wasn't a shaman. Then they come back from this interior experience about going, the metaphor of the forest or slaying an animal out there, these demons, and coming back, and they'd be like, oh, he's so spiritual. Let him be the shaman. They've reached the other side. Well, I'll give you a metaphor that I don't think anyone's ever shared this. I've looked for it. I think they give all the wrong metaphors, but and Nietzsche kind of alluded to a little bit of this about the man that goes off into the desert, with a camel with all his books and thinks he's all that and becomes the lion. And of course, then he becomes all alone because he thinks he's so intellectual and this, that, and the other. And then the final thing he meets is the dragon with all the scales of thou shalt not. That's the progression of a man through his life. But this metaphor I want to share with you is when you've seen all the time. And that is the metaphor of the dragon inside the cave, right, with the young virgin in white and all the gold. You see it in the Tolkien movies. You see it everywhere. And then what happens? A knight has to come and slay the dragon and save the girl, and he gets the gold, right? That's the idea. But just like all of these fairy tales, they're not what you've been told. If you've ever gone down the fairy tale road, they're not anything like what Disney extracts from that. If you look at the originals, they're very dark. They were very true. And quite evil, actually. I mean, even Snow White, Humpty Dumpty, if you look at that, it was about a drunkard. There was a drink called Humpty Dumpty because they'd hump over, they'd be dumped in a ditch. Snow White was about a mother that wanted to kill, or did. This was a practice to save the lands for the deep. I don't want to go down there. I will go back to this metaphor of the dragon and being slayed. So what that really is, in my personal humble opinion, is that the cave is you, right? The cave is interior. It's like in Star Wars, when Yoda tells Skywalker, you go into the cave, and he says, well, I need my sword. He goes, no, where you go, you will need no weapon. And he goes in, and who does he see? He goes in the dark cave, and he sees Darth Vader, and he slays him, like the knight, the Jedi Knight. And when he takes off the helmet, what does he see? He sees himself, right? Because your greatest enemy is you. The greatest enemy is fear, right? Is you.
A domain of evil it is. And you must go.
What's in there?
Only what you take with you. Your weapons. You will not need them.
And so that was kind of the metaphor of that. But to the dragon in the cave, that cave is you. Okay, that cave is you, and the night is you. Is it? Do you have the courage to go in and tackle the dragon to get the woman? Is that what it really means, or the gold? No. Think this through. Let me ask you: could a dragon do anything with that woman? I mean, he could eat her, but clearly he's not. That's not the metaphor. I mean, why does she have to be a virgin, and why should she be a wife? He could eat any woman, right? It could be a man. It could be anything. It could be an animal, right? But why is it a virgin? Is it because when you look deep inside you, the two greatest battles that you have as a human being is lust, and is the other one also greed? And is the dragon power? So that if you look at the three sins in the Bible, even with Eve, this is what I think it goes back to, is that you had the fruit, right, which was good to look at, right, desire to make one wise, and you'd become a god. All three are there. So the power, the lust, and the greed. So when you look at that, do you have the ability to cowboy up, cowgirl up, go deep inside yourself through some of these techniques? And there's tons of these techniques. I'm just sharing you the one that me and John Lilly talked about. Go inside what he called the center of the cyclone, your omega point. Find the I can't stand myself. Go to the I. Really look at yourself. Look at all these images of your past. Have them come up. Deal with them objectively. Kick them to the curb. Learn to grow your mind so you can be more centered, right? You're not so stretched from left to right. And become a better person. Right. That's, to me, I know a lot of people are afraid of all this stuff. And as a Christian, I know a lot of people are afraid of this from a Christian point of view. But I just wanted to share with you that I don't believe there's anything to be afraid of here. I believe this is the secret that they're holding. But the difference is that when the dark and white magic people talk about this, white magic people will talk about this as you get your spirit animal, to fill you. What is your spirit? I don't want a spirit inside my spirit. No, I don't want that. Or an evil spirit will come in. That's what they do. They draw the pentagram, they throw the salt out, and they capture a demon. And if you're able to capture the demon, then you get the power of the demon. It's kind of like the whole David thing, but that's a little different story. But I don't, if you read Aleister Crowley, and I was into Aleister Crowley for a while before I realized, wow, this is really dark, heavy, deep, and true. Is that what they're doing? Is they're capturing? That's where Aleister Crowley went nuts. As he tried to, he was going up the hierarchy until he went to one that was a little bit too big and bad, and he became insane. So I don't want to fill this with anything spirit animal or spirit of demon. But from a Christian point of view, this is why I don't believe the Christians should be afraid of this, because this is biblical. Okay, be still and know that I am God. Be still, right? But more importantly, what Paul says, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. In the life which I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God. He gave himself for me. So to wrap this up, the true Christian stance, right, is the same to get to the center, except instead of filling it with an animal or some crazy spirit, you fill it with the Spirit of God. Or in this case, it would be the Word of God, because the Word of God is the Spirit of God. So you would fill yourself with the Spirit of God, and as the Spirit of God was relayed and came out, unfolded out from your walk and your talk and your aura, people would say there's something different about you, right? Because it would be true Christianity. So I don't believe there's anything to be fearful of when I talk about this stuff. I know I'll get a lot of comments like I'm, agnostic or Gnostic, and I do have a video on there about map makers, about the emptying of self. And what I'm trying to relay through that is that these people were brilliant. They did some brilliant work. I mean, it's all in there. And, Ockwell, spiral dynamics, Dumbeck, there's a lot of them in there. But in the end, what I'm saying is that you can map out all of this stuff, right? You can conceptually framework it. But in the end of that video, you will see that it's emptiness, which is the secret to everything. That's what Musashi realizes, is Haihu is, I believe is what it's called, is emptiness. So you have to empty yourself before you can be filled. And isn't that what Bruce Lee said? You got to empty your cup before you can be filled. If your cup is full, then but what is it full with? It's full of crap is what it's full with. It's filled with all these things that have happened to you. And so you just need to learn to release them. I likened it to, you go through the river of life, and every time something happens to you, you take this leather thing with a rock, and next thing you know, you're just literally stuck in the bottom and you're submerged and your life goes nowhere. You need to cut ties with all these things in your past, right? And at the same time, be in the now and realize that all of these emotions that they're generating for you through social media, through music. We're going to talk about music because that's what that billionaire wanted to talk about. When I went into Chateau Marmont and I went into the bungalow, he had two bungalows. One was the same bungalow that John Belushi died in, not just a few years earlier. I was in that same bungalow. And I went to his bungalow, and he had all these instruments there. It was really bizarre. I would love to talk about it, but not today. What I want you to take away from all this is that you are a temple, right? And you have a beginning and an end, and there's only so much time. There's only so many breaths, and within the space of your life, if you can learn to slow down, and we can share techniques if you want, I will share with them. You can train your mind to get into these states consciously, access the unconscious realm, the collective unconscious, whatever you want to call it, a super intelligence, and you can objectively see the big things you're holding back and release them. They bubble up and release them and let them go. And at the same time, even yourself out. I hope you got something from this. I need to get more detailed. It was probably all over the place, but hopefully you got something from this. Please put some comments down, and I will try to be more specific and detailed. And if you want me to talk about more what we talked about, John Lilly, I will do so, and also the billionaire. But I appreciate that. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe. And again, hopefully you got some value. Please comment below. Thank you.